A show based on the facts, honesty, the man, the myth, the legend, ChristiTutionalist Joseph M. Leonard.
Welcome to ChristiTutionalist Politics Podcast, aka CTP. I am your host, Joseph M. Leonard, and that's Leonard. CTP is your no muss, no fuss, just me, you, and occasional guest type podcast. Really appreciate you tuning in. As Graham Norton would say, let's get on with the show! Hello, everybody. This is going to be an odd sub-intro to the show. First, for those seeing on behind the scenes video, yes, there's a different background that isn't quite fitting correctly. So, yes, I won't be using that in the future. The other thing is blue tongue, because I had a blue Slurpee. At any rate, the oddness of this is I was accidentally invoked in the last Saturday Your American Heritage show on Wham Radio. Well, I'm glad I was accidentally incorrectly invoked during the show. That I was mentioned is the least important part of this episode, but it is pertinent to the setup of why this episode is this episode. It started off texts and phone conversations about Norton v. Shelby again, which I'd previously done a show on. And as the main segment of this episode will be a replay of that episode. But that came up, and I'm glad I was incorrectly invoked, which dragged me into this conversation, reminding me of the importance of the Norton v. Shelby, especially with everything that's currently going on now with us trying to reduce size and scope of government. Norton v. Shelby is very relevant in that regard. So I am going to play the relevant part of the Your American Heritage show. Thank you to Ed Bondarenko for permission to do so. Then there will be indeed the replay of the Norton v. Shelby show that I had done. And if I recall correctly, I actually used a Savaged Unfiltered show that I was on discussing it in that. So it's kind of a replay of a replay of whatever. It'll make sense when you get into it, right? But indeed, before I play the Your American Heritage snippet and then that show, I want to read something in a text from Janice. She'll know who she is. She's been involved in this discussion over these last few days. She stated, after listening back to the full Your American Heritage show, she sent a text to Professor Wagner, who was part of the Your American Heritage show, and she says she sent, "Hi, Professor Wagner, Janice here. I caught and enjoyed the tail end of your interview with Ed Bondarenko when you discussed the case Norton v. Shelby County. Did you know that case was cited by Judge Eileen Cannon, whose name you should know of late in the news, in the so-called documents case last year, where she identified Jack Smith as being non-existent because, according to Norton, there was no office to fill a proper application of that precedent, improper overreach of government, usurpation of powers they don't have congressional at times, and certainly not constitutional authority to engage in. At any rate, continuing on, I am currently involved with a group that is convinced of the universal application of the principles contained in Norton as it relates to the politics of the current landscape. I wholeheartedly agree. Have you considered citing Norton in your cases? I agree. He should be. Many of these cases, Norton should be a citation and an argument in all these cases on up to and into and through the Supreme Court, reminding this SCOTUS that SCOTUS ages ago set this precedent. Reading on, we believe it is that important and controlling. Would love to hear your thoughts. Call anytime, Janice. At any rate, that won't make as much sense now. Maybe listen back to the beginning of the show, this segment, to hear what she said again after we go into the Norton case, and you better understand it. Okay? At any rate, I'm lowering a window there that came from Push Bullet, the program I use on my laptop that my texts can be displayed on my laptop via my SMS smartphone, right? At any rate, TMI, you didn't need to know that. So let's get into it. And shout out to Rob. You'll hear his name again in a minute and understand the confusion of why I was mentioned. It was Rob bringing it up, not me bringing it up again. But at any rate, no matter who brings it up, it's important. So let's dive into it again, shall we? Thank you all. Take care. God bless.
We're playing Ask the Professor. And I've got a question. My hand's up, sir.
Hey, remember in law school, the professor does ask the questions.
Okay, well, my question is, when the term comes up, executive power, that doesn't mean king, right? That means to execute the laws that Congress has passed. It doesn't mean just to do whatever he wants to do, correct?
Absolutely. And here's some really interesting constitutional history. Why do we call the president as opposed to king or monarch or governor? Well, they, thought about all those terms. His Excellency was considered. They decided on the term president because governor was too strong a word. The president was only going to preside over the office, and they weren't going to have the powers of a king. They were going to have the executive power, but they wanted to make sure that it was we the people that were in charge ultimately, and that the Congress would make the laws. But then to execute the laws, they said the executive power shall be vested in the president of the United States, the president. So, once again, I'm going to suggest that suggests that there's a fair amount of inherent power. Let me give you an example. Under Article 2 of the Constitution, the president has the power to appoint the cabinet and the officers that run the United States. You with me so far?
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything in Article 2, though, whether or not the president has the power to remove a government official, which is kind of in the news right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, guess what, though? If you've got the power to appoint, and under the Constitution, all executive power is vested in your office, how in the world do you appoint if you don't have the inherent power to remove? And so you clearly have the inherent power to remove. And the Supreme Court has, said that from time to time. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing some of these challenges to the current president's exercise of executive power. I'm really looking forward to seeing them get to the U.S. Supreme Court, and hopefully we'll have a court that resolves it based on what the Constitution says, rather than what I'm seeing at the lower district court level, what some of these, district court judges would prefer the Constitution says.
Yeah. We've seen some let's see now, nope, that's not the one I wanted. That's not the one I wanted. And I lost what I wanted because it said appeals court allows DOJ to continue to downside USAID. So, it's interesting when you listen to the news or read the news, but more often we listen to it or watch it. The comment will be made who the judge was appointed to, as if that was a team reference, like, oh, he's on this side or he's on that side. Obama appointed Biden. And then surprise, Trump appointed this person and ruled against Trump. Now that I'll I find some integrity in maybe.
Yeah, well, here's the key. Instead of the media saying this judge was appointed by such and such, here are two questions you should always ask when you see anybody in the government acting. The first, because they're exercising power when they act, right? If legislature, Congress is writing a law, that's power. If the executive is carrying out some law or executing some kind of power, that's the exercise of power. So the first question you should always ask when you see somebody in government exercising power is, where did you get the authority to exercise that power? Point to me in the Constitution, the place where you have authority to regulate education at the federal level. If they can't answer that question, they're exercising power that's outside the Constitution and is unconstitutional. The second question that you always ask is, when you see somebody exercising power and they can point to a proper power source within the Constitution or a congressional law, the second question you got to ask is, are you using that power, government person, in a way that's interfering with one of our inalienable fundamental rights? Because if you are, now you still are violating the Constitution, even though you had the authority to act in the first place. You didn't have the authority to use that power in a way that interferes with our free exercise of religious conscience or our freedom of speech or violates due process, whatever. And those are the two questions you should be asking, as opposed to who appointed. And unfortunately, we live in a world where you can inevitably figure out that, hey, they don't care about what the Constitution says. They're ruling either for or against somebody based on, their political preferences. My hope is that the constitutional order can be restored. I think we're seeing great progress toward that. I also know that all have sinned and fallen short, the good book says. And as Lord Acton, confirmed, he said the corollary to all of sin and fallen short is that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so, that can be discouraging when you're hoping to have a constitutional order that's based on the rule of law as opposed to what some judge likes or not likes.
Okay. When you were talking about some of this, reading the Constitution and arguing from the Constitution, what do you think about the 14th Amendment and anchor babies? What's your take?
I've got pretty sure that the Supreme Court is going to look at it this way, because the Constitution talks about, if you're born in the United States, but then it says subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And you got to read those two things together because they were written together. And so you don't have to be just born in the United States, but you got to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So if, for example, if there is a couple that is in the United States legally, they're not citizens, but they are here visiting, or they're on a green card or whatever, and they have a baby, I think that baby is going to be subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and therefore would be, a citizen. If you have invaded this country, or if you have illegally, crossed the border and you're here unlawfully and you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and you have a baby here, I do not think that baby is subject to the jurisdiction. And if to answer your question, I think that's how the court's going to come down on it. Right there. It is, if a person is here legally and they have a baby and they're subject to the jurisdiction, then that baby that's not an anchor baby. That's a different situation. But if you come in here with the intention of having an anchor baby and you invade the nation, or you cross the border illegally, and you're not here under some kind of immunity of some kind, or you haven't sought refugee status and you're not here as a refugee, you're just here illegally. I don't think the court is. I think the court's going to uphold the president's power to say, no, go home.
If you come here with the intention of just having an anchor baby, but you do it with a green card, then you're saying they can stay. So we still have tourism, birth citizenship.
Well, that's a little different, I mean, yeah, that may, well, that's a little different because that you're talking about intent now. You've added an intent element to the situation. So, and now you're making the perfect law school exam where you could probably write it both ways. I don't know. That's a really good question. Not sure how the court would come down on that.
We're coming short here, and I see Derek typing, and I'm just going to say, Derek, whoever it is, put him on. We'll take the call. Sorry.
The caller wanted me to pass along this comment. Okay, I'll go ahead and mention it. The caller's name is Rob, and he wanted to know if you were familiar with the Norton versus Shelby County case of 1886.
Is this Joe?
I think, don't we get this question every time I come on?
Joe from Wyandotte comes up with it every time. That's weird. It's not, is Joe using a pseudonym? Go ahead.
I have, it's a case that came in 1886. It's a Supreme Court case that dealt with the validity of how valid acts by public officials who were not lawfully appointed. So if there's an official that's not lawfully appointed, what's the validity of the act? And so there's always a question or a legal issue that the court has to decide. Well, the question that the court had to decide in that case was if a public office was created by an unconstitutional law, are the actions of those officials legally valid? And, the court said an unconstitutional act is not a law. It confers no rights. I can't remember the rest. It doesn't give any special protection. It doesn't create an office. And it's inoperative, just like it had not been passed in the first place. So bottom line is, if a law is unconstitutional, it's void from the very beginning, and it always is going to be void. And any office or action that is built on it would also be invalid. And so if he's getting, heading toward what I was talking about early on, the Department of Education, that could be a very interesting connection between that Supreme Court decision in 1886 being applied to the president's desire to get rid of the Department of Education in 2026. And so how cool would that be is if the Supreme Court ruled that the Department of Education was created in an unconstitutional manner. So therefore, any law that was ever passed, pursuant to that would be invalid. So
I want to watch the movie. I can't wait to watch the movie after it happens in real life. I want to watch the analysis of it, who gets portrayed as what. Well, we have about 3 minutes left, and you have some stuff going on. You have some amicus briefs, some stuff before the Supreme Court. Do you want to talk real quick about that?
We just filed a petition before the U.S. Supreme Court, which is we're representing a number of legislators in the state of Michigan, and they're asking the court to let them speak for the people when the executive branch violates the U.S. Constitution, and particularly when the U.S. Constitution election clause is violated by the executive branch. These legislators want to be able to challenge that. The election clause in the U.S. Constitution says that the legislature is the one that makes the laws and the policies with regard to federal elections. When we had in Michigan, we had, Prop 2, the legislature didn't do that. They went direct democracy, and they bypassed the U.S. constitutional process for doing that. But because the majority of the legislature are members of the governor's party, there's nobody challenging the illegal action that happened. So these legislators are saying, let us do it. And we've just petitioned the Supreme Court to, ask them to decide if the legislators can do that. The other big thing I got going on is I'm doing a brief representing Colorado legislators and maybe some Michigan legislators as well on behalf of this idea that, well, let me tell you what happened. There's a counselor that was a Christian, and she had a license to be a counselor, and she had a lot of clients that were Christians as well that had gone down and maybe had been indoctrinated and gone down the wrong road with regard to human sexuality, and these Christian people wanted to realign their human sexuality with their faith and with biological truth again, and the law in Colorado prohibits a counselor from helping them to do that. You can't say anything that would, be about somebody returning to heterosexuality. You can only speak the other way, pushing it the other way. And so we've got a case now in the U.S. Supreme Court arguing once again that the court is using its power. At the court, but Colorado is using its power to interfere with the free exercise of religious conscience and freedom of speech.
Amen. Well, thank you for that. And you got it in within the time allotted to us by Derek, who held the sign up. Folks, we've been talking to Professor Will Wagner. Thanks for joining us. We appreciate it, Will. Very enlightening. Folks, come on back for Your American Heritage. Thank you.
Norton versus Shelby County, Tennessee. This episode is going to go a bit into the weeds, farther than we like to normally go. Normally, I like to try to keep a 30,000-foot view of things. Norton versus Shelby is an old case about government overreach, is the term I'm going to use here. But the actual technical term, of course, is usurpation. I want to mention an article, tinyurl.com/redpillstrategy here, and yes, it will be listed in the show notes, about terminology and the things we lead with. Norton v. Shelby is not something that you're going to want to jump in with someone you've just met at the grocery store. This is for your group of friends that can handle going down the deeper rabbit holes and the more technical aspects of things that we need to discuss. It's like the Hunter Biden laptop. I was speaking with a friend the other day, Janice Gardner, no relation to Michael Gardner of Savaged Unfiltered podcast. Janice Gardner and I was talking just the other day, and she mentioned Waco and Ruby Ridge. And my reaction was, we can barely get people to pay attention to the Hunter Biden laptop, something happening right now, let alone while Waco and Ruby Ridge are important points to go down the path of all these government abuses that have been going on for a long time. This isn't new, but those are not something you want to lead with. There are certain topics we have to be careful. Our red pill strategy. Certain topics like the Hunter Biden laptop, the evidence is there. The facts are there. If we can't get them to pay attention to that and the evidence on that laptop, then it's going to be difficult to get them to go down any of the other more difficult rabbit holes like the Norton v. Shelby case. In segment 3, this show is going to have 3 segments. I'll wrap up with a third segment. I will discuss a couple of 9 key points that my friend John and Ron, my friends John and Ron, with a Liberty group put together regarding the case. I'm not going to go that deep into the weeds here yet. Again, at the start here, I want to take an overall broader view. Also, let me point out that the case document will be linked in the show notes. I use Dropbox. There will be a link to a Dropbox document of the case so that if you want to go further down that rabbit hole, please do read it. Look at that for yourself. share it with others that you know are of the degree and level that can handle such. Don't overburden and overload someone who just got off their couch yesterday. This is way too deep a topic, way too harsh for them to take on early in their adventures into getting involved in politics, which ChristiTutionalist Politics show is partly about, getting people off their couch. Again, I've written a piece called Will Real Christians Save America? We can't be sitting on our couch online, blah, 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 just virtue signaling. We have to do the things that matter. We have to become precinct delegates. We have to go to committee meetings. We have to go to school board meetings. We have to go to city council meetings. We must be involved to put pressure on people, even within the Republican Party. I'm not just talking about fighting fascocrats here. I'm talking also about fighting CNOs and rhinos within. Spring, the primary is rhino season, as they say, and the fall is jackass season. You fight the rhinos and the CNOs in the primary, and you pull the Republican straight ticket in the fall, because even a rhino, someone who's only with me or you, us, 60% of the time, is still infinitely better than a fascocrat who we might agree with, 10% of the time, if that. So rhino season is in the spring, jackass season is in the fall. Let me say this: no king but King Jesus. That was a mantra of our founders, so spare us. Our founders weren't really Christian. They weren't really religious. That's all a bunch of bunk, of course, from the Freedom from Religion Foundation. There's no such thing. We have a First Amendment freedom of religion, and there's no such constitutional or law about separation of church and state. That comes from a Thomas Jefferson letter that the left distorts and takes out of context, tries to apply it as if it is some legal or constitutional bearing and legitimate restriction. And that's not true. You have no reason to not bring your Christian faith and apply it to your politics. The left, as I like to say, tinyurl.com/sometwistjesus's their motto really is separation from church to state, not separation of church and state. And Neil Mammon, my friend, please get his book, Jesus is Involved in Politics. Why aren't you, and why isn't your church? So the deep state is like a monarchy, unelected, ungoverned, with little oversight that the Congress is supposed to provide. The deep state acts on its own, filled with leftists, of course, because conservatives, ChristiTutionalists, are busy trying to pursue life and happiness, right? Our pursuit of happiness, life and liberty. They are tyrannical and want to lord over us. But again, no king but King Jesus. And these alphabet soup agencies do not, a lot of them, have any legal constitutional authority, let alone legitimate congressional authority. Many of them have way overstepped the congressional limitations put upon them when they were created as an agency by an act of Congress. And in segment 2, I will be playing a segment from a live stream, July 1st, Savaged Unfiltered podcast myself, Michael, and Sadia discussed some of these issues. So I'm not going to go into them here. We will go into them in segment 2. No king, but King Jesus. Yes, I know. I've repeated it for a 3rd time, right? Our founders were religious. They didn't want a monarchy. And the deep state basically acts as unelected bureaucrats we can't get rid of. They're not elected. They get hired, and you can't fire these people. The governmental unions, even FDR, the biggest pro-union guy on the planet, Mr. Progressive himself, said, there is no business for being government unions. Unions are for the private sector. The government is supposed to respond directly to we the people and the Congress at our own pleasure. They are to serve, and they must go from time to time. They cannot have lifelong 50-year careers lording over us. At any rate, I am now going to go into the Savaged Unfiltered July 1st Rumble live stream we did regarding Norton v. Shelby. Most importantly, pay attention to my argument with Sadia regarding the EPA and the Department of Education when it comes to the alphabet soups, and then way overstepping, overreach, usurpation technically. But again, you use that word, you're going to lose a lot of people. So yes, we have to bring it down to a level that we can converse with a common language, and overreach is something everyone can understand. Usurpation is a term that is just not in many people's vocabulary. And Sadia defends the deep state. I was frankly amazed at it. And from there, we will lead into the Savaged Unfiltered live stream. And then after that, we will be back for a wrap-up segment.
Concerns, guys. Really appreciate it. So welcome to today's show, guys. We're going to talk about the Norton versus Shelby case of 1886. Yeah, it's an old fucking case, guys. Real old case. So why are we talking about it? Because no one is, and it should be talked about. On its way, I guess, Gremlins. It happens from time to time. But I want to say thank you for those who are tuning us in on Rump. Much appreciated. Bring Joseph into the panel.
Challenge some of these regulations and rulings that come out of these deep state organizations, the alphabet agencies that technically are unconstitutional and illegal and are not duly real elected officials, appointed bureaucrats with no legal authority over us.
Right. But yeah, I agree. I really do. You know, there was a video here I wanted to plug into the show with a woman basically speaking up against this. This was an old video, folks. This is maybe a year and a half ago. It's old, but it's still fresh in content and fresh in relevance of what we're talking about. Before I plug it in, producer Shaky plugs it in. Where do you think, Joseph, I heard bits and pieces of it because I came into the stream as you were talking, but what do you think, do you think this Shelby or Norton versus Shelby thing is going to disappear soon, or people are going to talk about it more?
Well, it's been gone for decades. It's been basically lost. And here in Michigan, John Tatar, who ran for Wayne County Sheriff in the last election, is one of a group of people who are trying to reintroduce it into the lexicon of the legal posturing, and see if they can get it back into our consciousness and discussing it, and indeed find out whether other precedences have supplanted it, or potentially a SCOTUS ruling they're just not looking at or overlooking or, I hate to say maybe ignoring because it's not convenient. Obviously, everybody wants to posture and position and present the things that are beneficial to their side. In this case, it's my side, but their agenda, our agenda in this case. You could see in the chat was saying she was looking for a Michigan case for Shelby County here, and it's actually Tennessee. Michigan is referenced in some of the materials. It brings together other states. Who you're talking to, Michael?
Okay, I think we got Sadia on here. This you gotta love live stream. When other people's networks are not working correctly. But
I'll take the blame.
We got Sadia here.
Shit happens.
So Sadia, you have any insight on this?
So let me make sure that I'm on the same page as everybody. So Shelby County issued bonds because they were indebted to a railroad company, but the people issuing these bonds weren't the actual recognized government. Is that correct?
More or less. Again, not duly elected officials. You can't have some third party alphabet agency removed.
Yeah, it definitely happens. So, guys, we want to put a graphic on here. Hopefully, everybody can hear me. I'm not sure exactly what's going on with Rumble or Go ahead, Sadia.
So I was able to do a little bit of research, and I can understand why it's important. You can't have people running around saying that they're part of the government if they're not, and taxing property, which I imagine is what people are worried about now. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. Yeah. I'm upset that we're putting undocumented immigrants in hotels in New York and kicking out veterans. There is a lot. I think this is an important case. I think it's important that we talk about it now. From what it looks like, there never was a commissioner in that county. And some guy was just like, hey, I'm the commissioner. I'm going to raise this money. And that's not okay. If you claim to be a duly elected official, you had better be a duly elected official. So I think that's what I took from it.
Yeah, my concern is expanding it beyond that. The point being, again, even though a commission may be appointed, the technicality whether or not, like in this case, he was not appointed by a duly elected official, even to a commission, to say he's working on behalf of the elected government. I think it could, and should be pushed to the Supreme Court even further, that these alphabet agencies, even though created by Congress, are recommissioned.
Plain and simple. I mean, this is.
If they're not re-upped every 10 years, they should be sunsetted, right? The Congress needs to reapprove these agencies because the Congress changes every 2 years. They're not bound by a previous Congress. And these agencies cannot be left to be running rogue and roughshod. They need to come back to the Congress and say, here's our charter, here's our mission, this is what we intend to do. You re-up us or you don't. They're not appointed, can't be appointed king. That's the point here. We left a monarchy.
Joseph, do you think the FBI needs to establish its validity every 10 years and the CIA? Or are we talking more like local level kind of stuff?
Every agency. Half of them are unconstitutional to begin with. So yes, we have to have that discussion.
Okay, the FBI, from what I understand, was created because let's say somebody commits a crime in Nevada but crosses the border into California. To settle the argument of who has to track down the bad guy, the minute you cross state lines, bam, FBI. It's now a federal thing.
But they have gone way beyond that. Take the EPA. Richard Nixon, not all that long ago, in my lifetime, right, created the EPA, the same argument. It's just only, each state has its own EPA. This only affects cross-state issues. They've way gone beyond their constitutional and allowed authority under the laws which they were created.
Can you give an example?
Okay. The EPA and with other agency regulating ponds as wetlands. You have no authority over that. That is an in-state issue. Get the hell out of my bleeping backyard. You do not have the authority.
Joseph, I agree with you, but here's something here I want to plug into the show here. With the woman reaching out in a courtroom about this issue. Like I said, folks, the video is very, 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 very old. Very, very, very old. So you're going to want to check this video out, guys.
Hi, my name is Janice Daniels. I'm with Michigan Conservative Union. I'm a board member, and I'm also a board member of the Election Integrity Fund and Force. The presentation that I was asked to make this evening was on election integrity. You might be kind of surprised because my slide says America is a republic and we intend to keep it. So what am I talking about? Is that election integrity? I think that there is a great intersectionality between election integrity and republicanism. Now, do I mean the Republican Party? No, I do not. In fact, at this point in my life, it's like boo-hiss to the Republican Party. If the Republican Party followed their platform, I would agree with what the Republican Party stands for, but they don't. And that is sad, and maybe we the people can get them to understand that they need to follow their platform. We're going to talk about good versus evil because, quite frankly, I think that this all boils down to the great battle that has been going on since the beginning of time, that is good versus evil. We have a modern-day republic in America that is unsurpassed in the history of the world throughout time. America's modern republic is so unique and so vital to success that, for example, Cleon Skousen wrote a book called The 5,000-Year Leap, in which he said the American form of government advanced society by 5,000 years in terms of the technological growth, in terms of the societal.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Joseph M. Leonard, host of ChristiTutionalist, taking a brief moment to thank myarchic.com. Together we share the Christian and family value of honoring family. myarchic.com helps you do that. Preserving family memories online also, therefore, can be shared online. Think of myArchic like a Noah's Ark for images, audio, video, preserving, honoring your family. Thank you again to the folks over at myarchic.com.
So basically, guys, you heard. I mean, you heard. This woman reaching out. Very. I guess very concerned. About our republic. She's concerned about the well-being of our future. Of a lot of different things. I mean, everything is on the line here. Voter integrity. We feel like in the last election, that slipped away. And it was more about, people's power than for the people. And that's my own personal opinion and my own aspect of on how I'm seeing this. I'm seeing our republic, folks, literally being stripped away. It's being stripped away from its power. And, I love to get Joseph's insight on this and everything else. I think we cleared up some gremlins. We had some gremlins in the in the network. So I think it's all cleared up. Hopefully you guys can hear me a lot better on Rumble. I do apologize. we're battling free speech, folks, on other platforms. So I think maybe accidentally Joseph is streaming on YouTube. So hopefully, if that's the case, hit that cancel button, Joe. Get it off, man. But anyway, usually when we do stream on YouTube, they love canceling us out and everything. So I think that might have been what the issue is. So I see some people coming in on Rumble. I want to get your comments. I see you. Leave the comments on there on our Rumble feed, please. It means a lot on this issue, Norton versus Shelby. And you're probably wondering, like, what the hell is this case, Michael? Well, this case goes back to 1886. Joseph, how can we, like I said, how can we restore our republic when elected officials are not even standing by the damn words?
Right. Well, number one, Mama Bears and Papa Bears need to go to school board meetings, and you need to wear a SavageArmy.com Roar Restore Our American Republic shirt when you're doing that. Hint, hint. Go to SavageArmy.com. But yeah, that woman, Janice Daniels, I know her personally. She used to be a Wham radio host. Great person, very knowledgeable, and indeed. It's funny that she mentioned about republicism. She said republicanism. I say it on my Facebook page under Martin Keeler because I have to be under an alias there. My count of 20 years was banned long ago, of course. But I say on my Facebook page, I am here for republicism, not Republican Party hackism.
Just more needs to be done. You know what I mean?
Well, part of the process is education, and we're doing that today. I wish John and Ron would have been able to be here with us. They know more of the ins and outs of it. Because I said they're kind of the ones here pushing it. Janice Daniels is part of John's group. I was there a week and a half ago signing books, signing and selling books to the group. And like Sadia was saying in the private chat, we are a republic. Yes, the word democracy does not appear in Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You one time. Because we are a republic, and that's part of the education in my book. And it's needed, isn't it, Sadia?
Well, yes, let's define what a republic is. If we were a true democracy, every citizen would sit down for 2 or 3 hours on a Friday and vote on all of this stuff for that week. That's a democracy. And that is not what we do. We are a republic because we vote for people who will vote on our behalf. I have 2 senators and a congressperson and city council people. So that's the difference. Now, some people argue that we now have the technology to become a true democracy, where the citizens themselves could vote and we could just abolish both houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate, and let the people actually vote. That's probably a few generations away. So a democracy is I vote on everything that affects me and affects my country. A republic is I'm going to vote for a senator. I have 2 senators, but they never run in the same year. A congressperson, that kind of thing.
But it is also important to clarify China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, they are republics too, but their constitution lay out the rights of the government power over the people, whereas our constitutionally limited republic limits the powers of are supposed to. It used to. We've long lost it and got to get it back. It limits the federal powers. 10th Amendment guarantees it to the states, not delegated. And again, these agencies, invalid, unconstitutional. Department of Education, completely unconstitutional. That is a state and a we the people issue, and we've got to get the republic back. But yes, other nations are a republic. It's important to make that distinction, how our Western republics are set far and above apart, like from the Magna Carta, than those tyrannical government given rights versus God-given rights under our republic and our Bill of Rights?
Joseph, I'm going to have to disagree with you on one thing. I think we need a federal or national Board of Education, because there are school districts in Texas that teach that Jesus rode dinosaurs. And seriously, I looked into this during the last election. So there is some merit in having a post office that can work in all 50 states. If you see the difference in education among, our worst states, Nevada's one of them, and our highest performing states, the facts are the facts. I don't believe Jesus rode dinosaurs. I think that's scientifically impossible.
Yeah, well, you're talking about one weird one-off anomaly. I'm talking about how the fact is education has declined ever since Jimmy Carter created the Department of Coercion rather than education. They use the stick of the money and the strings attached.
Here's the thing that we must need. We need to complete our republic, plain and simple. Plain and simple. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.
We are going to wrap up this episode, and first, thank you again to Michael Gardner of Savaged Unfiltered, the creator of that show, and it was the Patriot Angle before that, for allowing me to use that clip or these clips from the Saturday, July 1st live stream we did on Rumble regarding Norton v. Shelby with Michael, myself, and Sadia. Thank you again for that. And thank you, Shaky, also, the producer of Savaged Unfiltered. This is just going to be a brief wrap-up. And I know some of you are going to get lost in this. We're going to go kind of deep in the weeds, a little beyond what we normally would do on this podcast to try to stay at a higher 30,000-foot level looking at things. But there are a couple points out of the Norton v. Shelby County 118 U.S. 425 from 1886, a unanimous decision, states unequivocally and undeniably that its ruling holds that any government, federal, state, county, or local can never create a de facto office. We need to kind of touch on for those who want to indeed go into the weeds. If not, you can skip to the end of the show. You may want to skip ahead. One of the key points, as pointed out in the 9 most important points regarding Norton v. Shelby from my friend John Taylor, is 1, an unconstitutional act is not a law. That's pretty obvious, right? We would think. If it is not listed in the Constitution as a duty or responsibility in the well-defined duties of the government, it is unconstitutional. Seems pretty basic and common sense there, but so many people that is lost on. An unconstitutional act confers no rights, it imposes no duties, it affords no protection to any public functionaries who have acted as usurpers and violated the United States Constitution and or their state constitution and or their local charter, and can be removed from office having committed such acts. Again, pretty straightforward. 3, only the delegated authority of citizens as contained in the United States Constitution or state constitution or local charter can thereby create an office du jour, for there can be no office de facto. There is no provision in the United States Constitution, any state constitution, local charters, then such office de facto never existed. It is in legal contemplation as inoperative as though such act to create a de facto office had never been passed. I apologize. Obviously, I was reading that. I could have read that a little better. we're going to get a lot more deeper into the weeds here in this part. Jumping ahead to the 7th point. Du jure by right based on the Constitution or law passed in conjunction therewith, illegal encroachment, infringement on the duties of one's office, public functionary, anyone working for the government, either elected or appointed, delegation, the people delegate and or give the people functionaries duties and responsibilities they must perform while occupying such office as part of their job description, ratification, formal or informal, confirmation of an order, law, mandate, etc. Jumping to the 9th of 9 points, none of the levels of government, federal, state, county, or local, can create a de facto office. Again, I understand for many that may be a little too in the weeds, and I apologize for that. And I used the word usurper in there because that is what was in the document. That is the term legally for the court battles, the term that would be used for before the SCOTUS if we can attach Norton v. Shelby as a portion of a case going forward to the Supreme Court regarding alphabet agencies, and the term we would generally more often use of overreach, government overreach. And that goes back to red pill strategy. You don't want to necessarily talk over people's heads, correct? You use the word usurper, and I'm afraid many, their eyes will roll in their head and they'll just walk away. So using the word overreach, but technically speaking, I mean, the word usurper is what applies. Anyway, I wanted to close off with that here at the end. Thank you for tuning in. Take care. God bless. Okay, just ex post facto. What? I don't mean that. After the fact is the phrase. Boy, I can't talk right now. After the fact, a little bit of follow-up here to wrap things up, okay? Now you with me understand what I'm trying to say. As indeed Janice, I quoted in the text she sent to Wagner. And you saw Janice Daniels, if you're watching behind the videos from what Michael played during the Savaged and Filtered show portion of the discussion from a video she had, a video with her in it. At any rate, I'm scrambling all these thoughts now. But as Janice was saying, the point being, if you're confused, it's okay to be confused, and it's understandable some will be confused, as indeed we went into the weeds in this episode and showed you various different aspects of the implications and potential application. And I was referring to that text Janice sent me that to show me what she sent to Professor Wagner, that indeed it has been recently brought up again. So it is not irrelevant. And thankfully, there are some lawyers and some judges indeed looking at the precedents and the overall broader implications and applications of the entire Norton v. Shelby case, not just limited to the bonds situation as Sadia brought up, or the EPA overreach as I brought up. The Treaty of the Sea does not give them authority over the pond in my backyard. So, indeed, I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you will share the show. We need more people understanding this and putting pressure on people like Professor Wagner to incorporate these things into their pleadings before local, state, federal, district, and or ultimately the SCOTUS to remind the Amy Barretts and the Kavanaughs and, more importantly, our true real, true, 100% of the time constitutionalists, not Scalia, R.I.P., Thomas, I'm thinking of, right? The others tend to be like Chief Just-Ass Rob Turds, as I call them. Pardon. As you saw on the show, this is a PG-13, if not an R show now, with the swearing and whatnot that was involved in the savaged, unfiltered portion, because indeed that is an unfiltered show. So we get a little more animated, shall we say, at times on that version of the show. But people are noticing again, and we need to make more people notice the importance of this case and that it has to be reapplied now as the precedent in indeed the overreach and usurpation of countless deep state actors that were put in place and been acting as if they are the king, and our president is not the chief executive, or these district judges who think they can declare themselves president without having to run for the office. The chief executive, as Wagner pointed out in the Your American Heritage snippet part of the show, as presiding over the executive branch and solely invested in him and these deep state actors, whether congressionally approved, like in the case of the Department of Education, still way overstepping, like the EPA example, way beyond the bounds of what they were put in place to originally do, and acting as indeed Bernie Sanders, those oligarchs you're supposedly talking about, which of course, this is an aside, they want to try to overturn Citizens United. Citizens United, this is an aside, didn't go far enough. It was a usurpation of our First Amendment speech and property rights. If I have $1 million and I want to give it to a candidate, I have the right to do that. It's my money, it's my property, and I am giving it to him to amplify his voice on behalf of amplifying my voice. So Citizens United didn't go far enough, but the left, now wanting to supposedly take out the dark money, had this argument on Truth Social just the other day. No, they want to only, like the McLean-Feingold bill went too far and wasn't fully overturned, as Citizens United should have, because Rob Turds likes to moderate the court and limit rulings, limit scope of rulings. No, those are all violations of our rights, and the left wants to infringe upon them more. They want to remove money out of politics that they don't control. As I've put in, I'll dig up the memes or the images. They're a little older now, but they still relate, still apply. The point being, a Buffett or a Zuckerberg or a Gates or a Steyer Brothers or George Soros and his son's money is perfectly fine by the left. Those oligarchs are fine because they're expending billions of dollars on behalf of the commie, fascist, sociocrats. So all these things all ultimately tie together and are under assault and attack by the left on us wanting to return to our Republican form of limited governance that the left, who are out there calling everyone Nazis, are the fascists. Regarding Teslas, it is the left, it's not Elon wanting to mandate electric vehicles, even though Elon and Tesla would greatly benefit from it. It's the left who wants to engage in fascism and dictatorship and dictate an edict from DC top down, no more gas vehicles, like no more gas stoves or no more gas water heaters. They are the ones that are the Nazis and dictating. And as I've said, 28 planks of the National Socialist Deutschland Arbeiter Party platform is in the modern DNC platform, but they run around defending their Nazi social platform and calling everyone else Nazis. But again, I meant to wrap it up regarding Norton. I've done that, but all these other things relate. The left assault on those of us trying to get back to a limited constitutional republic, no, they want fascism of fascia federalism, as I call it, dictating down to the states, ignoring the 10th Amendment and everything else. So at any rate, wrapping it up, thank you all. Again, please go to Buzzsprout, check the official transcript there for the extended show notes. I'm writing down here intent, federalism, to make sure I link that article from the Liberty Beacon. Fascia federalism, original intent federalism, is nowhere even close, even though they were pushing for more federal power, nowhere close to the fascia federalism of today. At any rate, thank you all. Take care. God bless. This show has gotten too long. Could go on for 6 hours on these topics, but I know it would be too long then for you to be able to get anyone else to watch or listen to. Like, share, subscribe, please. Thank you for having tuned in for ChristiTutionalist Politics show. If you haven't already, please check out my primary internationally available book, Terror Strikes, coming soon to a city near you. Available anywhere books are sold. If you have locally run bookstores still near you, they can order it for you. And let me remind, over time, the fancy high production items will come. But for now, for starters, it's just you as a very appreciated listener by me. All substance, no fluff, just straight to key discussion points. A show that looks at a variety of topics, mostly politics, through a Christian U.S. constitutionalist lens. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Take care. God bless. Like and subscribe to ChristiTutionalist Politics podcast and share episodes. We need your help.
Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM is your conservative flamethrower. Weekdays, Steve Gruber starts things off at 6 a.m. Gruber gives his perspective on the issues of the day. At 9 a.m., Glenn Beck blazes the airwaves with his nationally syndicated program. From noon to 3, it's Dennis Prager. At 3 o'clock, it's Wham's own Thayrone X. On the Edge, Thayrone tells it exactly as he sees it. At 6, it's The Dana Show, your conservative alternative. At 8, don't miss Joe Pags. Weekends are filled with conservative talk as well. Fingers Malloy, Thomas LeDuc, The Abolitionists Roundtable, A Moment of Clarity with Pastor Rick, Your American Heritage with Ed Bondarenka, Dave Janda's Operation Freedom, and Dick Kupke's Trigger Talk. You can even get links to Wham podcasts from Dave, Dick, and of course Thayrone, all from their pages on our website, whamradio.com. Keep it locked on Wham Radio, 1600 AM and 92.7 FM in southeastern Michigan, and whamradio.com anywhere in the world.